Hey guys, have you been seeing signs or synchronicities, repeating numbers? Do you see a bunch of videos about star seeds, lucky girl syndrome, law of attraction, twin flames, things like that popping up on your feed? Well, you're probably having your spiritual awakening. And in this part 3 of my Divine Feminine Awakening series, I'm going to be talking about how practicing goddess religion can empower women. Because within the Christian faith, especially, the patriarchy itself is based on the suppression of women and control of women's sexuality. Because back in the day, like, I don't know, 5,000 years ago or something, there was these egalitarian societies in the past that it existed for probably close to 200,000 years, actually, according to research. And in these egalitarian societies, men and women worked together. They had equal roles, equal value, equal worth, and everyone helped everyone else, everyone respected everyone else, and everyone worked together as a team. And the beginning of the patriarchy came about because of two things: greed and the desire for power and control. And why those things came into play was because women have babies, right? If women can have sex with whoever they want, then they don't know who the baby's father is, right? And now in our modern society, if you got a baby and you don't know who the father is, you know what they call you? They call you a whore. And that's where the Madonna whore archetype comes in. There's two types of women in our society. There is the pure virgins, and then there's the whores. And both of those roles are very damaging to women because it pits women against each other, and it makes us fight for value, because our value is defined by who we can get as a husband, by being pretty or popular or the pick-me girl. And a lot of that is very inherently damaging to us as women, and that's what the patriarchy has tried to do. It has made women small, and it has pitted us against each other, so that instead of coming together as sisters and being strong, we're fighting with each other, which is not what we want. We want all women to come together in an inclusive way, and by doing that, we can all rise up much stronger. So when we practice goddess religion, when we return to these ancient faiths that honor women, in a lot of those ceremonial faiths, there was a ritual in the spring, which actually just passed, called Beltane. They still celebrate it here in Germany, which is weird. They raise up the maypole and they like do this little thing in the town square. I don't know. And that's actually based on an ancient Celtic witch tradition. So seeing that here in my little town was kind of exciting a couple weeks ago. And learning all the history behind it, that actually goes back to ancient pagan roots, because when they originally had the maypole, the young people would dance around the maypole and they would wrap these ribbons around it, and then they would light fires into the night, and then everybody would go and have sex in the woods. So pagans and sex, let me tell you. Christianity, they don't want you to talk about sex. Sex is but then they go look at porn, right? Or I don't know. So sex is something we're not supposed to talk about, especially not in spirituality. But within the pagan community, sex was not a taboo bad thing, and especially women's sexuality was not a taboo bad thing, and women could choose their sexual partners however they wanted. And so all the property passed through the mother's line, because the mother was the parent you knew you had, right? If you don't know who your dad is, then you're raised by mom, and mom gives her kid her stuff. So the patriarchy and the institution of marriage came about around 4000 BC. So that was when the patriarchy first started to assert its dominance, because men wanted the property to pass through the male line instead of through the female line. And in order to do that, they had to control women's sexuality. And back in the day, they didn't have DNA or paternity tests, so they could just be like, oh, you're the father, like on Maury. So they had to control their women. They had to lock them up and keep them separate and only let them sleep with their one man. So the patriarchy came about because of that, because men were greedy and they wanted their stuff. Not kidding, not lying. You can look this up. I actually go into this a whole bunch in my book that's in my bio, The Slavery of Women, that talks about how marriage made women into slaves and how that's been enforced through Christianity and the patriarchy, which is making a really, really nasty, ugly comeback in America today with closing down abortion rights and not letting women have birth control and wanting you to just be this nameless baby factory. And so as women, we have to reclaim our spirituality, we have to reclaim our sacred sexuality, and we have to allow ourselves to not be ashamed of our bodies, because our bodies are beautiful. Our bodies are not meant to sell Coca-Cola. Our bodies are meant to nurture our children. So to reclaim that, a lot of it has to do with going back to these ancient spiritual traditions that honor the mother goddess instead of honoring the Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit, that are all a man. And looking back at Christian history, the early days actually was much more egalitarian. In the time of Jesus, Jesus had women disciples. Jesus had Mary and Martha and Mary Magdalene, who were his disciples. And Mary Magdalene actually wrote her own gospel. But at the Council of Nicaea in 312 AD, when Emperor Constantine made Christianity the official religion of Rome, they decided which books were in the Bible and which books were out. There was a lot of them that was thrown out. The Gospel of Mary was one of the ones that was thrown out. So even though that had been a popular gospel written by one of Jesus's women disciples, who he was supposed to have imparted secret knowledge to that the other disciples were not privy to, according to this gospel and others that were suppressed as well. For those first 300 years of the early church, people were very commonly reading that gospel. And ancient historical finds in the last few years, since like the 1960s, have shown that that was a commonly read gospel in that time, because there are many copies of the Gospel of Mary that have been recovered from ancient historical sites. So people were reading that, people honored that, people listened to this woman's words as a powerful spiritual woman in the faith. And early Christian churches, a lot of them, there were women deacons, women disciples, women who were missionaries. Within Rome, there were women who converted that gave all their money to the poor. They started convents. They started the tradition of nuns, of spiritual women who were set apart. Again, just like in the priestesses of the ancient traditions, Christianity was very, very similar to that, and it honored women's voices, and it allowed women to speak, and it allowed women to have important roles. And it was only with Constantine and the institution of the patriarchy and the Pope and this male leadership that women's voices started to be put to the background. And to reclaim spirituality, you can still do that within the Christian faith. You can still honor yourself within the Christian faith, and you do not have to choose between your faith and yourself. You don't have to become a pagan. You don't have to become Wiccan. You don't have to say, I think Jesus is crap. Like, you can be both. And I think that knowing that is very important. And there are spiritual women within the Christian faith speaking up as well. And a good example of that is Beth Moore, who is a Bible study leader. And she would have been a minister if she wasn't a Southern Baptist, but they don't allow that. So if you want an example of a Christian woman to follow, look at her work and look at how she broke away from the Southern Baptist Church after the Access Hollywood tape and spoke up for women in terms of sexual assault and said, no, this is wrong. No, the church should not be supporting someone who is a freaking rapist to be the president of the United States. And they didn't like that. And she's not a Southern Baptist anymore. So whatever faith you are in, you can be a strong woman. You can have your connection to the divine, and you can be a powerful, strong, spiritual woman. And we need to band together and help each other as sisters. So follow for more. I got more coming for you. There is a lot on this topic. So let me know in the comments what you want to hear in the next video. Love you.